Adventurers, welcome back to the Elder Scrolls Lorecast. This is your host, Tom, or Robots. I'm here with my good buddy, Lotus of Doom, as usual. Lotus, how you doing, man?
I'm good. Lots of excitement since our last live show. Live recording, I suppose.
Yeah. So last time we got the big notification that there's the whole thing in Vegas happening next month. And I'm at a 95% chance of actually making this work. So yeah, we just gotta work out a few little details with the family arrangements and stuff like that. But it looks like I will be able to go. So if anybody else would like to go to Vegas and get together and we'll have a big podcast get together, let us know. Chime in on the Discord. Let us know that you'll be there, and we'll just kind of have a big list of people to get together and hang out, and it'll be awesome.
Yeah, it should be a lot of fun. I will definitely be there because our thing before I got confirmation of everything and got my QR code and all that goodness was I mentioned it to my wife and she was like, well, I want to go back to Vegas because the last time we went, she was like, one, it was super fun and everybody was really nice. But she was like, besides that, it was just super entertaining because we stayed a couple days after the event just to kind of go to Vegas because she had never been. And she was like, oh, I'd like to go back anyway. So that sounds great. So we did the same thing where it's like, all right, we'll just turn it into a little mini vacation to make it worth it for the both of us. And we did that before I even got confirmation. So I was like, at the worst, we're just going to vacation in Vegas.
We're just taking vacation.
5 days.
We won't even get into the show. We're just taking vacation.
I was like, hopefully I also get to go to the show while I'm there.
Yeah. Well, here, I didn't mention this to you during the pre-show while we were chatting about this, but one of the things that I plan to do, and I promise we'll get to the content. We're talking about Summerset today. We're going around still from locations. But one of the things I was thinking about doing was bringing a laptop and kind of an area mic. And maybe after the second day's events, you and I mean, it would be like a Thursday. We could do
an on the fly one.
I don't know if we'll be able to stream it live, but we'll at least be able to record while we're there and get an episode out and let people know what the event was like. So yeah, I was thinking that'd be a lot of fun. And maybe even have some guests, some people come by. Yeah. Right. It'll be a party. Yeah. It'll be a lot of fun.
Might be a fun little offshoot episode.
Yeah. So look forward to that. That'll be in a month or so. And then things will be back to normal. But this week we're talking about Summerset. We're still working our way clockwise around.
We're getting there
around the continent. Now we're off to some islands. We're talking about the Summerset Isles, roughly that area, and some of the isles that encompass that are part of that.
Accompany and encompass all combined into one word. Company. Perfect.
But here we go. So the Summerset Isles, sometimes just called Summerset, is the large island to the southwest of Tamriel's mainland. It is the largest of 3 main islands in the Summerset Isles, which encompasses over a dozen more smaller islands. And we're going to talk about some of those. And just a reminder, this isn't so much about the culture and the history and the peoples of this area, although generally this is known as being a place where all the Altmer are, and they don't like other people coming into these areas. So except for in the time of ESO where they've opened it up to tourism and that kind of thing.
Yeah, they had to open it up for tourism because things were kind of going south and they needed some reinforcements that might not be already on the island. So in rare occasions, it seems like they will make exceptions when it benefits them.
Or benefits the MMO
or benefits to the let story.
You bring your player into the place.
Oh, you're not part of the Dominion? Well, we need a reason to be able to scoot you in real quick.
Right.
So before we get too far from it, because I was actually kind of interesting, and this is better for the video version, but I mean, it's something all the way back to Arena and something I mocked when I was playing the Elder Scrolls 1 Arena. Summerset has actually changed its name slightly. And this is why I'm always like, the lore is a great thing and it's super entertaining and fun, but you do kind of need to keep it changes when it needs to. Yeah. And the spelling is literally different. And I have a map, which is actually a mouse pad from the original Elder Scrolls Arena. So
this is back in the time when you had those big boxes and things came in the boxes.
And originally it was spelt a little different.
It looks like Summerset,
Summerset
Sumur.
was what I was calling it, because it's spelt differently. And it's sort of never explained why it's changed, other than probably it's just easier to say Somerset.
Well, Elsewhere has kind of a unique spelling for something that you pronounce as elsewhere, and they kept it. And I think it's partly because it's supposed to be more foreign. Like, of any of the races that are supposed to feel kind of familiar, probably the High Elves, the Imperials,
your high fantasy,
and then
that you would recognize,
like people from
like Lord of the Rings
Daggerfall
or whatever,
right? Like these are supposed to be kind of familiar types of sounds,
right?
Yeah.
But yeah, so it was just something that I felt was worth noting, that it kind of looks more like it was pronounced Summerset originally. And then it just kind of morphed into the new spelling with, 2 M's and stuff like that.
And
it's a neat little piece of trivia that kind of changed over time.
Right. So it's now Somerset, like the word summer.
Summer, yes.
Ummer. Right.
Correct.
So, all right. So the landscape of Summerset Isle is similar to that of its sister island of Aradon. Aradon, we'll talk a little bit about too. It is the zone that was originally where you would go if you were a high elf, if you're doing the whole Aldmeri Dominion stuff in ESO when it first launched before the Summerset expansion, and then they opened up the whole big island. For exploration. But both of these have a warm climate, colorful forests, idyllic meadows, and I really like this word, craggy mountains.
Nothing beats the craggiest of mountains.
What is that? What do you think that means?
When I think of craggy mountains, I mean, I guess Somerset does have them because it's, it goes up and stuff like that. But I'm just picturing like sharp jags coming out of like giant rocks formations everywhere, which does not, my immediate thought when you say that is either High Rock or all of the places in Skyrim.
right. But see, the Skyrim mountains feel just more like regular, like snow-capped mountains. Like craggy to me feels like broken up and like
jagged.
Yeah. So it's a little bit different. But it's a pretty good explanation there, I think.
Yeah. Very high fantasy aesthetic in the region.
Right. Lots of very saturated colors.
Yep.
The zone feels very bright, like it is a more southern, closer to the equator kind of location. It is one of the most beautiful places you can visit in ESO. And I mean, you could visit in, like we've talked about with some of the other locations, you could visit it in Arena, but it looks like everywhere in Arena.
It looks like a procedurally generated, very pixelated.
Right.
So it didn't have a lot of unique qualities to it.
Right. And fortunately, this expansion came out late enough in the development years of ESO that they had really buttoned down the technology and the visual style of the game so that this area is a significant bump up from some of the, like if you go to Aradon, for example, it looks nice. It's a very nice looking location, but the tech improved between the original release,
very much so,
and Somerset. And Somerset just it's just more densely packed with grasses and greenery and animals running around and all of that kind of stuff. So it is a little bit more pleasant looking. So and for right now, I'm pulling from just kind of the general geography section of UESP, and it goes on. It says most of the southern part of the island and a central region in the north are covered with mountains, with a central pass linking the western and eastern parts of the island. The highest mountain on the island is Etten Near, located in the northern region. Coral is abundant on the shores of Summerset Isle. This is one of the really cool things that sets this island apart from everywhere else. Is you run around on the shores and you see coral structures, and the beaches are all very interestingly detailed. That's probably the way I'd put it.
Yeah, because it's not like you made reference to already. It's definitely got the tropical feel to it, like the more southern vibe and stuff like that. And a lot of it is beach related, like you're on beachfronts because they're islands. Like so they're objectively surrounded by beaches. I mean, there's not really a lot of ways to be connected to the ocean and not have abundant beaches.
Yeah, Rob says those beaches be crazy. Those are
nice.
some crazy beaches.
5 points, Rob.
Yeah. So coral is abundant on the shores of the Summerset Isle. The coral forest on the eastern shore is one of the best known coral formations. And coral formations are sometimes found far from the sea, which suggests original occupation by the Sload. A river or two tributaries named the Clot flows into the northeastern shore. And we're not going to get too into the history of this, but the Sload, the island was originally settled by the Altmer, which became the Altmer at that period during the Merithic era. Yep. And that early era of the history was very rife with conflict between the Altmer and the Sload and the Maomer.
I always say Maomer, but again, Maomer, it depends how much of it you want to pronounce.
It depends on how much peanut butter you have in your mouth.
Yeah. How many marbles are currently in your mouth when you're saying the race?
Yeah. So, but it has a very long history, lots of different phases throughout the different eras and all of that stuff, but we're not going to get into that part too much. Here, you know what? The flora and fauna is kind of minimal on this one. So why don't we do that one next? And then we're going to go to some of the locations on the second half. So is there anything from the flora and fauna that you want to point out? Is there anything in there that you
I personally,
really like?
This is directly related to ESO, because again, the majority of what we've seen of the area that's not very pixelated, procedurally generated, it comes from the Elder Scrolls Online. And personally, I love the coral design. Morrowind's area has a couple areas with this like land coral stuff that I think we mentioned. Vivek's Antlers it's basically above ground and it glows and it looks kind of radioactive. It's kind of weird. This is more like what you would expect from a coral reef, except that it's like interwoven with the island itself, which makes it really cool, because a lot of the cave structures you go into, you'll start in a cave and it'll be one thing, and as you go through the cave, it kind of almost morphs into coral, like you chiseled through the coral to get where you're going, which gives it a very, very unique feel. I really like that.
It's very alive.
It is.
Coral feels very alive. It's the home of so many little creatures and things like that. And it can be beautiful with all the different colors and shapes and all of that as well. So yeah, there's lots of coral. There's also different kinds of trees, red and purple maple trees.
The trees are a little more extravagant and a little less realistic. That's where a lot of the high fantasy comes in. One of the things which I guess it's not really, I guess, flora or fauna specifically. I didn't see any of it in the different notes, which is kind of weird actually. But one of the things, it sort of phased out of the series to kind of ground it a little more, which I guess is probably a good thing. But before we had seen it and when we had only heard about the whole situation, there was a lot more like, it is already a high fantasy area, but it even seemed a bit like they might have been really doubling down on the high fantasy originally and then reined it back in a bit, maybe for technical reasons, maybe just because they were like, okay, this doesn't actually make much sense. This is more of like when legends kind of grow their own story and it's like, okay, this has lost its grounding in reality. So there was this references. I wish I knew the book offhand, so apologies that I don't have the direct reference to, but there are allusions to the fact that it's like, some of the towers had like dragonfly wing glass windows.
The glass or butterfly wings or dragonfly wings.
You know what I'm talking? Yeah.
There's quotes from some of the old lore books
from the lore books
about the minarets and the towers that go impossibly high, and they're literally sculpted out of words, and it's like, okay, that doesn't make any sense. Right. It all just sounds like a fairy tale. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So it's like, that's where it's like, when you hear about that, okay, that's interesting, but then it's like, that happens in our real life. A lot of times things get kind of exaggerated to the point where it's like you've lost touch with what it originally was. And it's something that started in one way and then became this extravagant thing until you actually see it. And then it's almost like, oh, you let down because it's like, it doesn't live up to its legacy. Even if its legacy is totally made up.
Right. It's like, the same kind of, it's what they're doing in a lot of those old lore books is they're writing from the perspective of the Imperials. And that is very similar to Western Western society and the age of exploration, where you have people like Marco Polo going off to some, a random port halfway across the world, and then he doesn't return, but other people return, and then tell these crazy stories about Xanadu or wherever, right? And those stories are based on a little bit of truth and a lot of hearsay and them just making things sound more grand than they actually were or whatever. Right. This is the same kind of thing, that misunderstanding of these foreign worlds and locations. And so you get sort of some of that. So yeah, the spires and the buildings are, and we talk about the architecture in some of the other episodes about the different locations, and everything is built out of this like white looking, I don't know if it's like limestone or whatever. The towers are very light colored.
They are. It's not quite marble. It's not quite limestone. Like, I know what you mean. It doesn't have an aesthetic to anything specifically, but it's like kind of a little of all sorts of different things. I mean, I guess I'm not a rock and mineral expert, so maybe it is actually based on something very specific. But
sure.
It gives it a very clean, chic feel when you're in the area. And
bright, being that it's a very sunny southern location.
Right. It's a light rock. So it's like, as a side effect, when there's always sun in the area for the most part. Definitely not, the same idea as like Glenumbra, where it's always raining, which we haven't gotten to yet, but we'll get there. Yeah. But like, it reflects a lot.
Glenumbra is like the Seattle.
Glenumbra's just Tamriel, Seattle.
Oh, man. All right. Black Marsh is like Florida. Glenumbra is the Northwest.
Skyrim is New England.
So Summerset
we got the autumn
is,
and we got the winter.
What is really Summerset like Hawaii?
Yeah, maybe.
But with towers.
I can see that. Because it's also an island too.
Yeah. So if the native Hawaiians built gigantic towers, then you get Summerset.
Done.
There you go.
Perfect.
That's it.
Perfect.
Here, let's talk about some of the other flora. You've got other different types of trees, ginkgo, sea grape, spruce, mangroves. We talked about the mangroves and some of the other locations, and that's because of the watery areas and the beaches. And then some other smaller plants that are like blue and purple, wisteria, yellow oleander, pearlwort, which is a weird combination of a very pretty thing and a very not pretty thing. And glasswort, which are just some of the flora. But in general, the flora has these vibrant colors and it contrasts with the greens of the grasses and the other more common trees.
Sure.
So there's a lot of that. And then the fauna, there are a few weird looking animals here. You've got Gatus, the Welwa, the Iliadi is how you pronounce that?
Yep. Just going to let this play out. Yeah, that sounds good.
All right. Iliadi. Let's see what else. I'm sorry. It goes on. It says, which were exterminated by the Altmer when they colonized the island, although the Welwa were reintroduced to the island's ecosystem in the Second Era. Weird. The most iconic Summerset animals are griffins, and this is the one. These are and deer-like indrix. So the indrix are the pet that you can get in ESO, and for a while there, you could get different variations on them by collecting everything. And the griffins, the combination of griffins and indrix in this zone give it that high fantasy feel.
Yes, very much so. Griffins basically just like, people know what griffins are. They're not like a unique fantasy trope to the Elder Scrolls, but ironically it's been around since like the beginning, because you didn't see griffins in the original like 2 games, but you could get like griffin feathers like as a drop that you could just use to like vendor type of deal. So the idea was to always have them, and then obviously you are allowed to see griffins going forward. You actually have some interactions with them other than like you fight some as bosses, but then
they can be grumpy. You come across them in the world.
Yeah. Yes. And also on the flip side, they're kind of used as not really horses, because they have horses as well, but basically battle mounts, because like the Welkanar, they're known as the Griffin Riders, and they're like the most feared of the troopers for a lot of the Altmer. So it's like
imagine being in a world
battle animals. It's like,
imagine being in a world where you're stuck in like medieval warfare tactics, and then all of a sudden mounted soldiers flying on the backs of griffins swoop down at you. That's rough. That's OP. If that was in a video game, it would get nerfed.
Yes, would be. And actually, I guess on the note of this, it's just kind of weird because this is absolutely one of those situations where, you know, we like to kind of reference like the in-game and also sort of the technical stuff when it comes down to it. And I feel like we've needed to touch on the technical bits with a few of these things recently with discussing this whole thing. There's also another thing that's referred to as quasi-glyphs, which has been introduced to the Elder Scrolls Online, which basically it's a griffin, but it can't fly because then you'd have flying mounts.
Right.
Like it's essentially just a griffin, except it doesn't fly because then you can just run around on it. Like,
yeah.
That's really, otherwise it's just a griffin, but they call them a quasi-glyph so that they don't fly.
Right. The one other creature that is really notable about this location is called a canna, which is a very exotic looking bird. Think kind of like a parrot with a smaller beak, but also very bright feathers, greens and yellows and blues or reds. And they're specifically bred for their feathers.
Gross.
I
just imagine somebody's job is just like plucking them.
Well, they probably kill them and then just like skin them all at once.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
Or maybe they just trim them. I mean, you can trim a bird's feathers.
I was going to say,
like
I said, if you just non-violently pluck them, I suppose.
That poor bird. Ouch! Stop. Ouch!
I feel like the canna wouldn't really enjoy the situation very much.
No, it'd be better just to trim them real short. Like you do when you've got like a parakeet, you know, and you clip the wings so they can't fly.
Right.
And then you just, anyway. Okay. We're getting into the logistics of trimming bird feathers. All right. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to take a break. We're going to thank our patrons, and then we'll be back to talk about some of the locations and other islands, because there's a string of other islands that go on with this. So we'll be right back.
This is Hamish Morak, Dragonborn, and you are educating yourself to the Elder Scrolls Lorecast.
All right, here we are. Rob the Princess has some notes on the quasi-glyph. Because
I know, I like the little addition because there is some like more that there is some like logical lore that they kind of toss to it too, where it's like, you know, if they're using magic and selective breeding to make wingless griffins, well, okay, they can't fly around, so they're a lot easier to train. Granted,
they can't get away.
Like they lose a decent amount of their battle prowess if they can't fly, but nonetheless, like there you go. There's like even like a more in-lore reason as opposed to we don't want to give you flying mounts.
And this came from one of the newest mounts in the game. Is that some of the detail?
Yes, it was another one of the things like you had mentioned during the events. You can like get tickets and you build these pieces that allow you to collect enough parts to summon an Indrik. Same thing with the quasi-glyphs.
Quasi-glyphs, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So go check that out. It's cool. It's cool stuff. The mounts in ESO
they do look really cool. I mean,
really
they essentially just look like griffins.
Yeah. So here, we've got our patrons to shout out. We've got some new ones. Joey T, Obots Adio, which sounds strangely familiar.
Yeah, that is weird.
Sean B.
I can't put my finger on why it sounds familiar, though, so I just give up immediately.
Yeah, I don't know. Sean B. Not Sean Bean. That would be cool, too, but this is a different B. Hammerhead. And that's it. Those are our new patrons for this week. Thank you for joining. Welcome to the Patreon. I hope you're enjoying all of the extra content and all the other stuff you can get. Also, we're going to shout out our Daedric Princes, Kira C, Neon Knight, and Noodle Al Dente. Thank you for your support as Tier 5 Daedric Princes. And to all 127 of our patrons, thank you so much for your support. If you're interested in helping out, getting all sorts of cool stuff, contributing to this show, being a part of the Patreon, then go to patreon.com/Elder Scrolls Lorecast. It's that simple. And we don't have any new reviews this week, but if you would like to leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, we'll read it out on a future episode of the show. Plus, it helps us out as well.
Yeah.
And
plus, still appreciate all those 5-star reviews that every time I look at that thing, I was like, a lot of people take the time out of their day to give us a 5-star review, which is very nice.
It's very kind of everyone to even just do the slightest little thing, because it's we're in an economy where
it does not go unnoticed.
We're like, this is the internet economy of the 2020s, right? Like, free podcasts, go listen to the podcast. You don't have to do anything, and the fact that you would take some time to even just click a button is is actually huge because you have to make a point to go do it, right?
Right. You're choosing to spend, even if it doesn't sound like a lot, you are choosing to spend time to do that for us. So,
and it is huge. So thank you so much. And then those of you who listen on Spotify or any other platforms, you can always give us a rating on there as well. So thank you for all the 5-star ratings. Our community is amazing. And if let us know if you're going to Vegas.
Yes,
we want to hang out.
Let us know, because I was mentioning it on Tales as well, and just chatting on Twitter about it and everything like that. A lot of times, because we talk so much online, sometimes it might connect and just you think that like it's an obvious connection, like, but a lot of times it's a one-way, like, I know your name from online thing, but you see us doing this, or maybe you just recognize our voice because, again, the majority of you listen to the show and, you know, Tales as well, as opposed to watch them. But it's like, make sure we have context, because a lot of times I'm just like, oh, okay, that's who you are. And it's a little jarring at first when I'm like, if I'm staring blankly, it's because I have not connected the gamer tag to you yet.
Yeah, I know thousands of gamer tags at this point, and I'm like, which one is this again? I don't remember right off the top of my head, especially when it's in a different situation. It gets a little trickier. Right. I might have to bring my Robots Radio hat out of retirement. I was going to give it away, and then I didn't. So maybe I should do that. Anyway. Let's move on with the rest of the show.
Vegas.
Come say hi to us.
Or PAX East as well. That's another thing. That's happening beforehand. If you're going there, I know a lot of you are going there. There's not a specific ESO or Elder Scrolls thing there, but there's a lot of ESO and actually Elder Scrolls in general people there. If you're there, let me know as well.
Absolutely.
Lots of fun events.
Yep. All right. Let's move on with the rest of the show. Here we go.
Let's do it.
You're listening to the Elder Scrolls Lorecast, dear child of cities. That is why the Night Mother loves you.
All right, we're back. This is the part of the show where we're going to talk about the locations. We kind of moved it around, but let's start talking about some locations. Here is the quote. I found the quote, Lotus, that you were referring to. It comes from the Pocket Guide to the Empire.
Perfect.
And it says, and so the first location we're going to talk about is Alinor. Alinor is the capital of the island, of the Isle, and has been described by human traders as, quote, made from glass or insect wings. Other accounts by diplomats of the Riemann dynasty say that it is, quote, a hypnotic swirl of ramparts and impossibly high towers designed to catch the light of the sun and break it into its component colors, which lie draped across its stones until you are thankful for nightfall.
What a description.
Yeah. So, both of those come from different sections of the Pocket Guide to the Empire, but which totally makes sense, right? This is written from the perspective of somebody from the Empire. So there's that. There's the Crystal Tower, which we've talked about before. Yep. There's the city of Firsthold, which is the largest city in Auradon and the second largest city in the province. And Firsthold is a city built upon the cliffs of the Vaif region in Auradon and with waterways built from the Dikedo River. So cool stuff. And then there's Skywatch, which is a port city in the east of the Summerset Isles. And this is a city that was actually sieged by the Slode towards the end. So there's later dates of the First Era or the mid section of the First Era.
A lot of Slode assaults in this area.
Yeah, the Slode just really like picking on those Altmer. They do. Don't like them very much. And then there are some other cities we can mention. So we've got Alinor, Cloudrest, the Crystal Tower, Dusk, which is in the southeastern tip of the island, Etenir, which is the tallest mountain, which we mentioned before.
Yep.
Lalandril, which is a city that is home to the College of Sapiarchs, located on the western shore. Shimmerine, the city on the eastern shore, also known as the City of Lights. So that city has got a really cool name.
Yes.
Can you say this one? Salakik Ankur?
Beautiful.
Birthplace of Vanis Galarian. Awesome.
I like how that's its only notable feature.
That's the only notable thing in this little summary on the UESP. And then Sunhold, which is a city with a large port on the Isle located on the southern shore. The main road to Sunhold winds its way through the Eastern Pass. So a lot of these are locations that you can go visit in ESO as you go to different sections of the main island. But there are some other islands. We've got the main island of Summerset. We've got Aradon, which we mentioned, which contains the cities of Firsthold, Skywatched, and Volkelgard. But that's, as soon as I say that, I think of the word vocal, like to vocalize something. And then I'm like, that's not how that's pronounced.
Yep.
Volkelgard.
Before we move past Volkelgard, this is the most ridiculous piece of trivia, and it's real dumb, but it's something that my buddy actually found years ago, and we never can look at it the same way. When you are in Elder Scrolls Online, you're one of your starter cities is Volkelgard if you're in the Aldmeri Dominion Alliance. Mm-hmm. And all of the cities have guards in them. So it'll be like Alinor Guard or Whiterun Guard or whatever.
Or a Vocal Guard.
It's literally just called Vocal Guard, not a Vocal Guard. It's just a Vocal Guard. And I'm like, shouldn't it be a Vocal Guard? Yeah. But the name changes just for vocal guards.
That's weird. It should be Vocal Guard.
Yes, and I can never unsee that. And now if you play Elder Scrolls Online, you can't either.
Yeah. And if that guard happened to talk too much, you could call him a vocal guard.
Great.
If you needed to protect him, you would have to guard the vocal guard.
This is why people listen to this show, I'm sure of it.
Yeah. And if you were upset about it and wanted to complain, you would be vocal about guarding the vocal guard.
Moving right along.
All right. So there's Aradon, right? Also, Aradon, this is a fun little tidbit here. Aradon is Aradon, and you say these words multiple times, this starts to sound weird, is also where King Torinan landed while leaving Aldmeris. So during the fleeing of Aldmeris over to Tamriel, this is where the king originally landed. Wasn't actually in Summerset. It was actually in Aradon.
Right.
So that's kind of cool. Then there's Artaeum, and we can do an entire episode about Artaeum. This is the third largest island on the continent, home of the Sigic Order, so time wizards, right?
Yep.
And one summary of this is an ancient monastic order that has existed for millennia. Also, the island, this is according to the fandom article on this, and I like this summary. The island has a tendency to disappear off the face of Nirn.
Oops, where'd it go?
Which is true. Like they just...
It does. It regularly just is, boop, gone.
Yeah, the Sigic Order is like, we're not going to be physically here anymore. Boom.
Yeah. There's definitely a few incidents where throughout history they've been like, ooh, yeah, peace. And they just gone. And then they'll pop back up when need be or give people access when need be. But yeah, sometimes they really like to be like hyper neutral to all situations. We'll get into the Sigic Order another time. But like they really tried to stay very divorced from the whole politics of Tamriel, it seems like.
It's kind of watching a lot.
Yeah, they definitely got the voyeuristic thing, which is a little weird. But yeah, so it seems like to maximize that type of efficiency, they just kind of delete themselves from where everybody can see them for a while.
Yeah. So it's another one of those locations, kind of like the Clockwork City, that just is there, but it's not really there. Right. Else. You can also visit it in ESO. The Summerset expansion includes Artaeum as part of the story and one of the locations you go to. It's actually not very big. And we've talked about this before. The locations themselves are actually not that large. Like if Summerset in ESO was a real location, you could walk across the entire island in like an hour. Like it's not that big.
Right. Yeah. Where it's like probably a several day travel if you were to scale proportionately. But
yeah. So
video games.
Right. So there's a bunch of other minor islands. The first of which is Ivea, which is a small island located northwest of the Summerset Isles. It was settled by Archmage Shalador in the Second Era to be a safe haven for mages from the troubles of war. Sheogorath once tricked Shalagor into giving up the island as part of the Shivering Isles, but it was later returned in the Second Era.
Yes. Another weird little bit of trivia. You have it is in the Mages Guild storyline in the Elder Scrolls Online, and it is a travelable location. However, it's basically obscured on the map, where you need to go through a Mages Guild portal at a Mages Guild in order to go there.
Right.
And when you're there, you can see on the map, you're basically like out in the middle of the ocean. You can't even really see where you are. But if you highlight it, it'll say like Ivea on the map, but
Right.
it's not like an easily accessible area compared to like the other locations.
Right. And it's also very small. And
it's very small.
If you're going to do the scrying stuff and try to level up scrying, it's one of the best places to do that in. Because you can just do laps around it.
Space.
Yeah, it's really easy to get from one place to dig up another thing, then get another hint, and then go
totally
dig up
makes
another
sense.
thing. Yeah, it like pro strats there, everybody.
Yeah, I did not do that there. That is actually pretty solid. Yeah.
So then there's Aranorn. Aranorn Isle is located off the eastern coast of Skywatch and Auradon. It is used as a shipping complex and a warehouse for incoming ships to Skywatch. The Slode use the island as a base for the sack of Skywatch. Thanks, Slode. Not too much else about
Slode.
Yeah, not too much else about that island. Baranim with two eyes is an isolated isle off the coast of Mathisen. This was once the central hub for Altmer commerce before becoming abandoned by their descendants. A large ruin exists on the island. Then there's Salatar. Salatar is an island far from the Isle of Summerset. It was created by the Altmer, known as Aranius. Aranius. Aranius?
Aranius? Yeah. Call it Aranius, sure.
The Rock Witch of Salatar, who was recorded to have strange magic that allowed her to pull the island from the sea. The island has been abandoned for a long time. So I love these other like little minor locations.
Right.
Because they could show up again in future stories or something. So these are cool. And then there's one more, Branel Cur. The Isle of Branel Cur is a mysterious island covered by storms off the coast of Auradon that was once inhabited by the Sigic Order. It housed the Sigic Obscuros, a powerful scrying device. But it is not part of the same combination of islands or whatever that Artaeum is. It's a kind of separate location. I guess the Sigics were like, well, we like Artaeum better. So
yeah,
there you go.
Fair.
So to wrap this up, there's actually some fun little trivia bits. And this is one of the reasons we usually go to the UESP first if we're going to quote like anything from a wiki. But fandom.com has some fun stuff. So we'll look there.
Yeah, there's no slouch of a site at all. I was going to say, It's another very useful resource. It's always good to have a variety of resources at your disposal for this stuff. Right.
So there's some fun little trivia notes here. There's only 2 points on this one. The first one is the original name for the Elder Scrolls Morrowind was the Elder Scrolls 3 Tribunal, and was originally supposed to take place in the Summerset Isles, but was scrapped early on and changed to Morrowind for reasons still unknown. My guess is because they wanted to do weird and wacky stuff instead of high fantasy stuff.
Right. And, with the direction that the series has gone, I would say they probably made the right choice.
Yeah. And I think Morrowind was good for being able to do something really strange and then bring it way back to a more common kind of location with Oblivion in Cyrodiil and then Skyrim. So the other note here is bartender rumors in the Elder Scrolls Arena. So according to what bartenders will say in Arena, and I don't know if you ever came across this, Lotus, they include the line, quote, "My prophet says Summerset Isle spelled incorrectly to the two ways that we mentioned already.
Yeah.
This one has 2 M's and a U instead of 1 M and a U, or 2 M's and an E. So it's spelled incorrectly here, but this is a quote. My prophet says Summerset Isle is doomed to sink beneath the sea. He did not specify when, but it sounded like soon." Well, it hasn't happened yet. And there's the whole sinking under the sea thing from Aldmiris. So maybe there was just confusion there. Maybe the prophet was confused, or maybe the writers just hadn't really incorporated that into the history of the lore.
Or maybe it became Yakuta, where they sunk that island instead.
Maybe
for the series, Thras can't keep its head above water, pun intended, I guess.
There's a lot of sinking islands and islands that are there but aren't there, or are they there?
I feel like there's a lot of buoyancy problems in there.
Yeah. So there is that as well. But it is definitely a location that's worth checking out if you haven't played ESO and played the Summerset expansion and want to just even go on a tour and see what it looks like, or look up some videos of it. It's very pretty, especially for even for an MMO that's been out for years and years and years now.
Yeah, we're almost about to celebrate the 9th anniversary of Elder Scrolls Online.
Yeah, that's amazing. So there you go. Pulling an Atlantis in 5th era, says HDD in chat.
Yeah,
HD
Dalton. Seems very highly possible.
Yeah. Aldmiris? Atlantis? I never thought about that similarity either. There it is. So that's going to do it for Summerset. We will continue our exploration across Tamriel on the next episode. But Lotus, before we head out, you got anything else going on you want to share?
No, that's pretty much it. Really, it's just been a lot of event planning for me. And other than that, just the usual. We've got Tales of Tamriel being recorded again, hopefully this weekend without too much problem. And just kind of covering the news and stuff like that. We've got new dungeons on the way, as well as some combat changes, but in a good way, coming to the game and stuff like that. Right on the horizon. It's just a few more weeks away for PC, and then a little bit, actually not even a few weeks for PC, a few more weeks for console, and that's 2 weeks after PC. So it's right on the horizon if that's your type of deal.
We spent the most of the last year with everybody all debating and clamoring about combat changes. They're ruining the game. Blah 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 blah. So now they're fixing them. We're back to yay combat changes.
So yeah, it's I guess just like as a very quick synopsis, I was actually one of the people who did not really care for the direction of combat. Did it ruin the game? No, but I did not. It was very much missing the mark that they kept saying they were going for, which was like, we want to get more people into being able to do more challenging things by nerfing things. And it was like, well, that doesn't make any, like, nerfing content, I guess, but nerfing us, how would that help? And it was, they had been mentioning a way of kind of hybridizing and stuff like that. And there was some varying debates, and if people want different things, it's hard, it's very hard to appease both.
You can't give everybody everything everybody wants.
And one of the things that I felt was a very strong addition, and then it went through an iteration of changes constantly, was this Oaken Soul ring and all this stuff. And without going on a huge diatribe, you can check out Tales of Tamriel if you want. We had guests on who do this for a literal living, is analyze this stuff, giving their different perspectives and things like that. But they kind of stopped. My big problem was they just kept changing everything. So everything became, here's an overhaul. And then the next patch, it's an overhaul again. And I was like, I don't have the time to keep up with learning all of this over and over and over again. Just pick something and go with it. And they've kind of picked something and have been going with it, which is what I wanted. And I'm like, okay.
Is it a good thing?
So there are a lot of good combat changes for tanks, which are all great quality of life things, which I love. Makes it much more intuitive. And they brought back a couple features that have been gone for years that people missed. So great features. And they brought this Oaken Soul thing where you only have to use 1 bar instead of 2 in the game. And it opened up this whole swath of new heavy attack style builds for those of you who don't like this thing called weaving in the game, which is very divisive. And it's allowing people into all this new stuff. And I've completely changed from doing the old style DPS to doing this just because I think it's so much fun.
So they've, in a sense, given people the option to do one or the other, whatever they prefer.
Literally seemed like an impossibility at the time. It's like, well, if you like light attack weaving, you can't both do light attack weaving as a thing and also not do light attack weaving as a thing?
Would you instead
sort of did?
Would you instead just cast your abilities and on occasion do your heavy attacks to get your stamina or magicka back?
So basically, yes, you throw down your abilities or your damage over time things, any buffs you've got, and then because the Oaken Soul ring has this thing that empowers your heavy attacks to do more damage, you can build around making your heavy attacks do a lot of damage. So you just throw a couple damage over time effects on, and you just heavy attack until you need to recast your dots. You'll never be quite as strong as somebody who is masterful at light attack weaving.
Sure.
But we objectively can do basically the hardest content you can. We in fact just did one of the new dungeon speedrun no death hard modes all at the same time in the dungeon called Graven Deep with 3 of us only using that new heavy attack style thing.
Yeah.
And
so
that was it.
You would have to get the Oakensoul ring.
That makes it easiest.
Okay. And where do you get that? How do you get that? It's like
an
a quest?
antiquity.
Okay.
It's like, so you basically use the antiquities feature where you scry and dig up and stuff like that. And it's made of 5 parts. So you just kind of piece it together.
Right.
And it's a new mythic item.
Right.
Cool. But you can do it without, as long as you just get a skill that gives you this empower ability type of thing.
Right.
So,
right. So you do
getting
that.
super theory crafty in this show. It's just, that's been like the shift to the game. I think it's fantastic. It's allowed so many people after last year kind of having like a burnout feel, myself included to a degree, not quite to the extreme because I love all aspects of the game, but the combat really was not feeling great. I have not enjoyed combat this much since I first started playing Elder Scrolls Online for an endorsement. Like some people don't like it because they're like, oh, it's too easy. Then you can still use the other one because technically you can do better. Like you have a higher damage ceiling, but a much lower damage floor the old way. This way, you have a much higher floor of damage, and your ceiling is pretty close to the floor. You just kind of have a set amount that you do.
Right.
I just think it's great. I think it's a lot of fun. I really have been enjoying it.
It reduces the variance. That's cool.
Yeah,
I'll have to go check it out.
I'm very pleased that it seems like they did have more of a direction than it seemed like they did. They definitely had a lot of us kind of questioning the end goal, and we're still not at said end goal, but it seems like there's more of a direction there than it looked like there was. Because right now, in my opinion, combat's feeling great in the game, and there is variety whether you want to do this way or another way and stuff like that. So I'm a big fan, big fan, and so is Rob in chat, who's an Oakensoul diehard as well. So.
Yeah, no, I mean, that sounds appealing to me too. I don't like having to constantly spam the buttons and then worry about
none of that. In fact, that's actively problematic to that style of play. Right. You got to do the old style if you want to do that. So it's very cool.
Cool. Well, awesome. I'm glad that they're updating that. And go check out Tales of Tamriel if you're more curious about any of that stuff. Any of my other shows or Tales of Tamriel, you can find links to all of these shows, everything on the Robots Radio Network at robotsradio.net. And just let us know if you're going to Vegas or any of these other events, because we'll plan a little get together. And thank you for tuning in, chat. Thanks for being here. Thanks for being here, Lotus. And
my
all
pleasure,
of our patrons, thank you for the support. And we'll be back next week. And until then, stay safe out there exploring Tamriel. We'll see you guys next time. Bye, everybody.
Have a good one.
Thanks for joining us. We'd love to hear from you. You can reach me on Twitter at robots_radio or Lotus of Doom at Lotus of Doom. Also, you can join us on the Robots Radio Discord channel. You can easily just search Robots Radio Discord on Google or check the description underneath the podcast. Also, this podcast is recorded live every week on Thursday nights, 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific on the Robots Radio channels on Twitch, YouTube, and on Facebook. So just search Robots Radio on any of those platforms. Come join us. We'd love to chat with you while we record the show, or before or after. Either way, just come hang out with us. And if you're looking for more information about my shows and the shows on the Robots Radio Network, go to robotsradio.net for all the information about all the shows on the network, including the Robots Radio Rocket Club, where I help both new and existing podcasters to grow their shows, build their audiences, and create the best podcast they possibly can. All of that at robotsradio.net. We'll see you next time.